Welcome to another episode of the Swamp247 Podcast. I am your host, Graham Hall, joined by my co-host, Zach Goodall today. And it's finally here. The 2025 season has already started. It felt like 8 months of anticipation and waiting to get to this moment. A lot of speculation. Talking season is officially in the books. We actually have 60 minutes of football to break down. For Florida, though, the caliber of the opponent means that we saw a lot of interesting depth options. We saw consistent rotating. We saw Florida use the game to solidify some of those backup roles, from the fifth linebacker spot to the cornerback battle to obviously the backup quarterback position, which was one we are going to talk about here. Florida secured a 55-0 victory over the Long Island Sharks. They started out promisingly, got a forced fumble on LIU's first possession of the game, punched out by Jaden Robinson. Bryce Thornton picked it up and found the end zone for 6 points. And from there, the route was on. Florida's offense, in my opinion, started a little bit slow. DJ Lagway came out after the game and said that he could play better. And if you looked at the stat line, though, you wouldn't have thought that it was a negative performance for him whatsoever. 15 of 18 passing for 120 yards. He had 3 touchdowns there in the second quarter, helped Florida build a 38-0 lead before turning it over to your new backup quarterback in Gainesville, Tramell Jones Jr., which was a bit of a surprise to some people, myself included, because I had heard throughout spring and into fall camp that it was a battle between Aiden Warner and Harrison Bailey for the backup quarterback job. But I got to give Zach some credit. He told me before the game that he expected Tramell Jones Jr. to be the backup in the contest, and that came to fruition. Shout out to you, Zach. You were absolutely right about that. And that seemed to be a justified decision. Again, the caliber of the opponent deserves to be factored into this conversation, but Jones looked really, really impressive. 12 of 18 passing, 131 yards, 2 touchdowns. He didn't make any mistakes. He showed poise. He was confident in the pocket. It was an impressive performance from him, and it wasn't just the only impressive performance from a freshman in the game. Vernell Brown III obviously had SportsCenter's #1 play. If you haven't seen it, I don't know where you've been. You got to go look it up. Did his best Odell Beckham Jr. impression. Had 79 yards in the first half, which is the most of a true freshman making their first start in a contest that we've ever seen, which was impressive in that regard. And he looked really, really good as Florida's primary punt returner, a role I expect him to continue in when Florida takes the field next Saturday at 4:15 p.m. against an insane opponent, USF, a team coming off an impressive, I should say dominant victory over a Boise State team that a year ago went 11-1 and made the college football playoff as that outside the Power 4 invitee, I should say. An impressive win for USF. You know, they've got talent at quarterback. They've recruited the state well. So the competition is absolutely going to amplify here in week 2. But for this episode of the Swamp247 Podcast, we are going to stick with the Long Island game, and we're going to give you something that Zach worked really, really hard on, not just watching the game back, but Zach was able to acquire the all-22 footage, which was allowing us to get a more complete view of how Florida lined up, how they looked, and how they executed. We're mainly going to focus on discussing the first half of this game because that was the one that featured the majority of Florida starters before turning it over to a lot of guys that we don't really expect to play a ton moving forward, just given the increase in competition and some of the unsettled roles there. So, Zach, I'm going to turn it over to you. You broke down the film. You did a really, really good job. I encourage everyone, if they want more information and thoughts from Zach, to go to swamp247.com and read his all-22 review. He's also going to be doing an all-22 preview of USF before the contest gets here on Saturday. But for right now, we're going to speak about the first 30 minutes of Florida's season opener. Zach, go in depth as much as you want, but what stood out to you offensively in the first half from DJ Lagway's long-awaited return and how Florida's offense looked in that first 30 minutes against the Sharks?
Yeah, just to I guess repeat what you said. This is something we're going to be doing, or I'll be doing, and Graham will certainly, I'm sure, pitch in with me, and he's got the tape too. Every week, I've been able to obtain access to all 22 footage from across the college football landscape. So it's unique content. You're not going to be able to find this anywhere else as it pertains to covering Florida. and I've even made this story free for today. If you're listening on Wednesday, the day that we record, you can check this out for free. Moving forward, they will all be VIP stories at Swamp247. We're running another promo right now for 60% off for the year. So I would highly encourage you, if you're looking for this kind of content, and if you enjoy this first sample, go and sign up. Again, this is not something that you're going to be finding anywhere else pertaining to breaking down every angle of the film. Like, I can see the full route being run, whereas you don't get that on the broadcast. You get the angle from behind the line of scrimmage, so you can see how the offensive line and conversely the defensive line are actually, like, what they're assigned to do and how those blocks or those offensive line penetrations really are working out. It's angles that are not available on the broadcast. So it's all very unique content. I'm excited to be breaking it down every week. Let's start, with the offense. My priority, as you'll see in this story, if you check it out, was to see not only how DJ Lagway looked from all angles after his offseason filled with, injury concerns, really limited his participation until about 12 days before the season, but also how Florida was planning to utilize him considering those circumstances. And to your point, like you said, I wholeheartedly agree. And DJ Lagway even put it this way too. He really was not pleased with how the game started. First quarter, Billy Napier has suggested that it was a result of what Long Island was putting on tape. I don't necessarily view it as Long Island did a bunch of exotic things that Florida may or may not have been used to. They ultimately were just dropping a lot of players into coverage. Most of the time 7, sometimes 8, a lot of zone coverages, not much man unless they were in off-man coverages. But for the most part, they were just taking away different zones. Florida's just got the athletes. At the end of the day, Long Island can do what they want to do schematically. Vernell Brown, J. Michael Sturdivant, Eugene Wilson, running route combinations. They're going to win those most of the time against a school like this, if only because of their athleticism. But even with that in mind, Florida came out with a really conservative start to this game. Obviously, they leaned into the ground game. We saw how Jaden Baugh did just on that first drive alone. I mean, he was running all over the place, and he continued to do that. He was breaking tackles left and right, evading defenders. But again, my priority was really to see what it looked like for DJ Lagway. I know Florida fans have their thoughts on some of the screens that Billy Napier will often call and the designs of those. I share in some of those concerns, and I do think it's important to note the level of competition, the game they were playing, first game of the year. They weren't going to put everything out on tape. They don't want your LSUs and Texases and Georgias of the world to see what they may be planning to do as the season goes on. So there was certainly a vanilla aspect to the game that was understandable, yet still part of the slow start to me was some of these design screens and behind the field or behind the line of scrimmage passes. Lagway threw 6 designs in the first half on those kind of plays. Eugene Wilson has caught some flack for ending the game with 5 receptions for 4 yards. And I don't necessarily know if I would put that on him. A lot of it was design based. There were several opportunities where these screen passes and some of these swings, there was one where he was operating out of the shotgun in a 21 personnel look with Jacoby Jackson, DJ Lagway, and Wilson in the backfield. Blocks just weren't really set up to allow the receiver to be successful on those. There's one I think of, it was the 21 personnel look. He catches a swing out of the backfield. Jacoby Jackson motions out to the right side and gets past Vernell Brown and J. Michael Sturdivant, who are offering perimeter blocking. And I think both of those players executed their assignments. Jacoby Jackson, however, went a bit wide, and the linebacker, who is much narrower and closer to the line of scrimmage, was able to breeze right through untouched, drop Wilson for a loss of, I believe, 1 yard. I don't know if that's because Jackson went too far. I don't know if the design was for Jackson to widen out as far as he did, but one way or another, it was a design flaw, and Wilson, even being the athlete that he is, wasn't able to make the guy miss and was dropped for a loss. And that happened on several occasions. But to that point, DJ Lagway threw a lot of those short passes to get things started. As they got into the second quarter, Florida started opening some more of its designs. I guess I should say on the first snap of the game, he took a sack, and I thought that was his worst decision of the night, and that there weren't many, if any, bad decisions on DJ's part aside from that play. And that was a longer developing play. His key route was to the left side with Trey running about a 16 to 18 yard bench route, a little bit more long developing as he was like working from the slot into the middle of the field and then back out toward the sideline DJ wanted to hit it, and I think he had every right to, because Eugene Wilson, it took a little bit of time, but he got wide open at the sideline. At that point, though, it was so long developing that Austin Barber, who had a great game and really did not, I wouldn't consider this a pressure allowed on his part, but his block went a bit long. It got to a point where it was so long developing that he lost his grip on the block. DJ had locked on to Eugene at that point and had missed Hayden Hansen wide open in the flat area, who had enough room to probably go for another 5 or 10 yards after the catch should DJ have hit him. But he stuck to Wilson, ended up having to evade a couple of tacklers, and was dropped for, I believe, a 5-yard loss. I know I'm hammering a lot more of the negative stuff to start, but again, DJ, I think, would agree. As he said, they started slow. His word was sloppy. They picked up into the second quarter. You saw some more vertical routes starting to develop. They ran a crossing pattern with Vernell Brown, I believe 3 different times, and 2 of them were one was unsuccessful as DJ ended up getting hit off of pressure. Roderick Kearney pulled across the offensive line from right guard to go and take on the left edge. He wasn't able to get a strong block on it because he had to move across traffic just to get over to someone who was untouched. And as a result, DJ was hit when he threw. Otherwise, he had Vernell Brown wide open for what I think would be a big gain. There was another one of those where Vernell did make the catch, and I think it was put slightly behind him for a similar reason. DJ faced a bit of pressure off of a block that was missed by Tony Livingston, and DJ was still able to connect. He stepped up and made the throw. It could have been better placed, where Brown may have caught it 424 and then extended it for even more. You look at that defensive pass interference that went against a route to J. Michael Sturdivant. That was an interesting concept. It was one I hadn't really seen Billy Napier run before that I can think of, where he had 5 wide. DJ was operating out of empty in the slots, one being Sturdivant, one being Hayden Hansen, actually. Both ran up the seam. They ran go routes. It was a rail shot throw. It's one of those ones that they do at Elite 11. If that's something you guys pay attention to, where the quarterback has to really needle it between 2 defenders, it can't just be a lofty go route. It's got to be like on a dime, going right to the receiver. It was a great throw. J. Michael Sturdivant was open. The only threat to him, if the coverage was clean, was a middle of the field safety who was a bit delayed because of Hansen running the same route to the other side. If there weren't a defensive pass interference because the slot corner knew he had been cooked, so he just grabbed onto J. Michael Sturdivant's back, that was probably a 68-yard touchdown. This is where it's starting to pick up for him in the second half. You obviously look at that Vernell Brown catch that you mentioned, and I thought that was an extremely impressive play on Vernell's part, which I believe everyone would say. It was also a really smart play on DJ Lagway's part. As it's been noted by many analysts, Bryce Lovett did not have a fantastic debut. I had him down for 2 pressures allowed in the first half. Also struggled with some run blocking. And this was really late. This was that final drive that set up the touchdown to J. Michael Sturdivant before DJ exited the game. I think he had started to become a bit wary of the pressure that Lovett was allowing. He could feel, even though he was looking off to the left, I believe, for Eugene Wilson, he could feel pressure potentially coming from his right because of a move that was put on Lovett. So he, even without looking that way, sidestepped and began to roll out to the right. And now, in fairness to Bryce Lovett, Bryce actually completed that block and it was a pancake block at the end. He put the defender face down in the dirt. It just took him a second to recover. But DJ, understanding that potential threat without even seeing it, he wasn't looking that way, but he felt it. He knew that he needed to roll out to the right. At that point, it was another deep crosser by Brown. He started to flatten it out when he got to the sideline, understanding that DJ was about to scramble and had begun to. And on a scramble drill, receivers, when they're deep, they want to work their way back to the quarterback and become a bit more of a safety valve. But DJ just let it rip. And that's one of those throws that we know few quarterbacks can make, yet DJ Lagway is perfectly capable. He went off platform, didn't reset his feet, was kind of like midair almost when he unleashed that thing. And it goes, I want to say 45-ish air yards, maybe closer to 50 when you consider DJ having rolled and being further behind the line of scrimmage. And then Vernell Brown does the rest. It was an incredible play, again, not just on Vernell's part, but I think on DJ's too. And I would say the same thing about the touchdowns. You know, they were 4, 4, and 8 yards. When you look at those on a stat sheet, they're not necessarily plays that you think are something to write home about. But the first one was DJ throwing from the left hash to the right sideline with Eugene Wilson making that toe tap. I think he was the primary read because they ran a similar type of play on the J. Michael Sturdivant touchdown where he too was the primary. You've got to believe Jacoby Jackson on the first one as the outside right receiver, Hayden Hansen on the Sturdivant one as the outside right receiver. Both of those players run really shallow slant routes. It kind of works like a rub route where you create a pick on the defenders, although they were playing enough off that it didn't actually cause the defenders to make contact. But they effectively either had to swap assignments on a dime or continue to follow their originally assigned receiver. And that's what they did both times. So on the first one, Eugene Wilson against a slot defender, especially on a Long Island defense, he's going to win that every time. And he created ample separation, got to the sideline, made a toe tapping grab. His best catch of the night, arguably one of the best of his career. Again, you don't have to consider the yardage here as much as the play itself. In Lagway making that throw, it was a 4-yard throw on the stat sheet. It was a 30-ish yard throw, 25 to 30 when all was said and done, with him going from the left hash all the way to the opposite sideline and giving Wilson a toe tapper. Hayden Hansen was a similar one where he caught it up at the right front right pylon from 4 yards out. That was a designed rollout to the right on play action. DJ knew that that's where he wanted to go. It was kind of a levels concept from what I could tell. Tony Livingston cut across the line of scrimmage and was the under route. He kind of got chipped by an edge rusher, and maybe that was designed for him to delay the pressure that was put on Lagway, but one way or another, it kind of slowed down his route. But Hayden kind of releases into the middle, acting as though he's going to block, and then cuts right down to the front right pylon, gets wide open. J. Michael Sturdivant was also running across the back of the end zone on a crosser. He was wide open. Maybe he would have been the target if that edge rusher weren't in the way. I think that ultimately is what prevented DJ from seeing him and releasing a pass to him. But one way or another, I still believe that Hansen was the primary. He was the closest receiver to Lagway as he rolled out. Easy pitching catch score. Last one, Sturdivant's too. Again, similar concept. Hansen runs that skinny slant. It takes the outside corner with him. Sturdivant, kind of like Wilson, just a better athlete than what Long Island had on the field, and he's taking this slot defender on. He runs more of a back shoulder fade rather than an out route, but one way or another, he and Hansen still cross paths. And DJ puts a really good back shoulder ball on him. And could it have been better? Maybe. But at the end of the day, it was still in a position where a Long Island defender at least isn't going to be able to contest it. J. Michael Sturdivant makes a great adjustment, like midair, to bring that ball in from his side, again, where really only he can play it. Now, would an LSU Tigers defensive back maybe be able to play that because they're a more gifted defensive back? Maybe, and that's where you'll want to see DJ sharpen that throw. But at the end of the day, against this competition, his first real back shoulder fade that I've seen him throw this season, it still ended up being a fantastic connection. And that's where that was his last pass of the night. He got pulled off the field after that. But when you consider how things started slow, I think he was 5 of 6 for 18 in the first half, then goes 10 of 12 for 102 and 3 scores in the second. You really did see DJ get into a groove. Offensive line offered some really strong protection across the board. Sans Bryce Lovett's 2 pressures that I saw, Tony Livingston allowing 1. Najee Harris, I believe, allowed 1 pressure. Otherwise, it was a perfect game from Austin Barber, from Jake Slaughter, from Damian George in protection as they were blocking for DJ Lagway. Receivers, when they had their opportunities, they were getting open. It was good. I know that there were concerns with the way things started, but it's more important about the way they finished when you consider the circumstances of the game, the offseason that DJ Lagway endured. They walked off the field after a successful stint of drives, and I think Florida fans should be encouraged by that. Sorry to take it so long, but this is what happens when you're a film nut like me. You just can go on and on about it.
No, we want you to be as thorough as possible. It's why we thought you were an ideal fit at Swamp247. Your ability to break down film and give your opinion confidently makes you an absolutely reliable asset at Swamp247. And I hope everyone out there, like I said, wants to know more, can read his stuff over at Swamp247. A lot of really good film breakdowns, more in-depth than that just was as well. I got to say, before we look at the defensive side of the ball, I do think that overall, just some of the sloppiness and the slow start that we saw on Saturday was justification for the decision to play DJ Lagway and the majority of the starting offensive players for more than just a couple of series, to play them the first half, because you don't want to pull guys when maybe they have failed to execute or there's stuff to clean up. You want to give them a chance to go out there and clean it up, regardless of the caliber of the opponent. And I thought that that was something that really stood out on Saturday as a wise decision. Before we get out of here, though, I know there weren't really as many things to analyze, especially from a negative perspective, but Florida's defense, pitched a shutout 55-0, first shutout in the Billy Napier era, I believe. The most points scored in the Billy Napier era, of course, but 55-0, Florida's defense just looked really fantastic, again, against an overmatched opponent. But the defense set the tone, helped Florida build that 38-0 lead there, got a defensive touchdown, got 2 fumbles recovered as well, with Bryce Thornton getting both of the takeaways. Zach, from watching Florida's defense, what stood out to you? Maybe just from a positive perspective. There could be a couple negatives, of course, but it's hard to critique, in my opinion, at least a shutout victory.
Yeah, no, I can keep this one much shorter. And truthfully, I think something kind of just takes looking at the stat book too. I mean, LIU went 4 of 11 passing. I think they averaged 1.2 yards per rushing attempt. So if we're going to nitpick, if we're going to look for a negative, those first 2 plays where they give up 10 or 11 yards over 2, they start with those quarterback keepers and those triple options, or the options that they were deploying there. It took Florida's defense 2 plays to figure out what was going on. Because by the 3rd play, Bryce Thornton recovers that fumble, takes it into the house. Later on, picks up another, setting up the offense perfectly for, I believe, its first or second touchdown. I think it was passing touchdown, I should say. It was sound, and they were rotating players through at the same time. I think you and I were both a bit surprised to see Joseph Mbachu, the freshman summer enrollee. Guys played only 1 season of football before this. He was out there on the 2nd drive. So they were not only pitching a shutout, but they were doing it with very different kinds of players and some green ones at the same time. But it was assignment sound football. Players were getting to the ball quickly. It wasn't so much of a high pressure kind of game, although George Gums had himself a few. I think it was extremely encouraging to see him similarly pick up where he left off last season after his emergence. Jaden Woods was another one too. They were bringing different defensive tackles through. Jamari Lyons and Mekhi Barrow both starting the game, I think as a result of Caleb Banks being out, but that was still interesting to me, considering we kind of view them both as nose tackles. So the fact that Lyons started out the game as a 3 technique with Barrow in the nose was interesting. Brendan Bett was another one. He wasn't necessarily creating as much pressure as he was clogging holes in the run game and forcing running backs to move out of maybe their preferred rushing lane. Miles Graham, to me, all over the field, finished with 5 tackles, didn't miss one, was targeted once in coverage, and it was not completed. To me, I think you could pick several players as your standout defensive player, but Miles, I thought, was the most dominant player on the field, unless you include Bryce Thornton scooping 2 fumbles and scoring on 1. I guess that's a pretty easy one to pick as well. But no, again, it was assignment sound football at the end of the day. You don't want to necessarily pull too much of it again, considering what we know of the LIU offense compared to just how talented and deep Florida's defense appears to be. But they were, after those first 2 plays, that was the first down allowed of the game. They only allowed 1 more, and I believe it was in the second half. So at that point, you are playing a lot of your backups, even some walk-ons, some reserves. It was just, to me, there's not much to break down on that end because they were just doing everything right. I think Billy Napier mentioned that there were only 6 missed tackles throughout the game. They want to get that down, I'm sure, more. But 6 missed tackles in this day and age of football, with the rules that have come into play, with the way tackling has, the rules have shifted when it comes to tackling over the last 10 or so years, and the amount of work they do in the offseason. To only have 6 in your first game, let alone really in any game, is a really impressive number. Billy Napier mentioned that there were only 2 instances of players loafing on the field as well, where they weren't running through the end of the whistle. You could see that maybe, and I don't know what these were specifically, but, and I will go back and look, you would think maybe it's like the defensive end on one side of the field and the ball is running to the opposite. maybe he didn't run through the whistle there. But again, to only have 2, it shows that there was not only sound assignment, technique-based football being played, it also shows that these defenders were taking this game seriously, opponent be damned. So much positive to take away from it. And again, I think it's as easy as you look at the stat book for this one, and you can see that Florida not only pitched a shutout, but pitched a pretty perfect game defensively.
Yeah, that was the message from Florida, both in the aftermath of the contest and in the build-up to Saturday, was that regardless of the caliber of the opponent, Florida was going to try and play their best game. And I do think that you got the sense on Saturday that that was the objective. I do continue to believe that this defense is the most impressive and probably the deepest it has been in the Billy Napier era. But with that caveat, everything we just said may not prove to be true if Florida does not continue to play as well as they did defensively in the weeks ahead, which starts Saturday against a very, very good quarterback in Byron Brown, a guy who in 2023 had more than 4,000 yards of total offense. It's an experienced team coming off a 34-7 victory over Boise State. But we're going to be talking more about USF on Friday when we return for the next episode of the Swamp 247 podcast. But that's going to do it for us today. Zach did a fantastic job breaking down the film. I hope you all appreciate the knowledge and insight that he shared. And like I said, if you want more information, go to swamp247.com. Read his breakdowns. We'll be doing more of those consistently throughout the season. Like he said, the only site covering the Florida Gators where you can get knowledge of the all-22 footage. But again, that's going to do it for us. For Zach Goodall, I'm Graham Hall, and we'll see you next time.